We didn't have a lot of time at the end of class yesterday to take any questions, and there seemed to be a number of people who had questions. So we'll start with questions. Anybody?
Can Rinpoche recommend, for those of us that know a little Tibetan, commentary to Gyaltse's work that might kind of be simple, not more complicated?
Today, we get to Shenken Solwa, and the number of those new those go lao do you out of this?
Yeah,
You out of this cut, you're not any the currency.
You go lab with that. Now the Chim Chimambia Vachita. That and the Tendal Haram was in the Tina Chip to chair. Anikas and Namdi, you mean the Duncan got Sanyachi, then the Yaris, the Yapuyaris, 지시를 소리들 야부야 돼.
Better you mean?
야, 민때때도 전에 거기 무슨 아재 출지되시 양자대 시에서 그렇지.
So, Rinpoche recommends, in particular, a work by a scholar that was mentioned earlier, Tenda Haramba. He has
야, 류니버데 닌데 지미셔야 말이야.
so that he has a text that is not so much a commentary of the words of the root text on the second chapter, but is sort of an overview, and it is a very good analysis of the key topics and how they should be understood. It's available in digital form. If people are interested, you can ask Katsukishi Darky can help you find it.
다티 나는 가르스나 돈바 참아 tuk주디야리 돈바 참아 tuk주디를 아니 농주다 농도 비리버시 지게야 비리버게 디디나라 제 돈바 참아 tuk주디 디네마 제네 아니 타바 tuk주디야리 되네 대시를 배두지체 대시를 배두지체 알레 점바천에 기부두지들을 누주들을 도그리바 게체 뒤쫓아서나 더 되네 뒤어지를 가르스네 대시를 배두지체 대시를 배두지체 뒤어지를 내리 당 일리들이 타번 리베트지 일리들이 탐지 가르사 탐지 전발지 리베트지 탐 어디 대시 가르사 동바 참만 두야 다가라네 이게 가르주리 탐지 기버 리베트 디디베 다티네 디오와지 아니 논도 리베트가 세지 다티 이슈들에 템바 니 참마도가 세 다티리 디지 디 어디 단남길 유니버비 셰야 디디리 다시 자오 코나체리 자오 아니 야부시라리 그래서 경험에 칠 때 지바 투지 정부 투지 정부 공부 삼법 편도 공부 저 동마를 공부 탈지 미기부 입에 제세디 삼법 가르쳐 우리가 당부 듣는 중 우리가 당부 뒤바 재미기 부들이야 다들 아니 경험의 지향아리 스직 저리가 디디 nengachi 어려운지 얘네야 아니 공부 탐미도 펴지 양말이 있으리라 네디 추더 추 조시리 있으리 진디 저기 말이 공부 탐미도 펴야리 디 투지 친구들 댄스리 자는 게 말이 있으니 주스나 다디
So in his work, this particular work, he addresses 5 main topics. The first one is the kind of reasoning that's presented in the chapter, but it just talks about the reasoning itself. That's used to establish the validity of or spiritual authority of the master, the Buddha. So that's really the kind of the overarching subject of the chapter, which is to explain, the chapter explains, starts by explaining the epithet of being and what it means to say that Buddha became a spiritual authority. And then there are the remaining 4 epithets that are presented in the original order or the forward order. And that is one way of proving the possibility and reasonableness of saying that the Buddha is in fact an enlightened person who is therefore supreme spiritual authority. From the point of view of the causes, right, meaning the attitude and the practice, those 2 qualities. And then there's the reverse for the epithets discussed in the reverse order, and then that in that reverse order the 4 noble truths are discussed extensively, and then they become the kind of the elements of that prove through which make known by the fact that the Buddha taught such an extraordinary teaching that only someone who is a spiritual authority could have done so knowing in that way, and works in the reverse order. So those are 8 points, and each one of them is addressed by Dendasarama as a specific reason, and then talks about them in his own language. So that's the first point. Second point is then more specifically, how the 4 noble truths can be understood in terms of arguments. What are the arguments that prove the correctness of the doctrine of the 4 noble truths? Dambashi Ribedrupsul means what's the reasoning that can establish their validity. Then, actually, these 5 points are what we've been following here, right? So the third one is then reasoning that established the truthfulness of the ultimate goal, called highest good, or melek in Tibetan, and specifically of the 2, then the first form of the highest good is liberation itself, right? And so that's addressed as how we talked about that, I think, yesterday. And then so it says that the element of logic that proves the highest good understood in reference to Buddhahood, that really comes under the subject matter of the first topic, which is to say that there are 2 principal causes, the excellent form of practice, that can be cultivated continually over many lifetimes and culminate in the epithets of being a Sugata and being a savior and capable of teaching the knowledge that he himself ate. So that's part of the main topic of the highest good or ultimate goal of Buddhism is a valid claim that there is such a thing. And then the second one was the temporary goal of the higher realms existence, and that's what we talked about yesterday afternoon, right? And then the final one, the 5th one, is then the Buddha's teaching, right? And the 2 aspects of the Buddha's teaching are the scriptural teaching and the teaching that is attained, or the teaching in the form of the knowledge of practicing the scriptural teaching. So that's this presentation that's kind of explaining the meaning of what the whole chapter is about in that text.
That's the want to take to the certitudes. Don't want to say the had me go on to the moon to see had me go on to the once in a town had me lieutenant to the moon to lieutenant. And had me Nibuti Taman to Sachi. Taman to tell me Longju Tilla me Longju Tilla Longju Mondosi. And me Kora Jero, Koryaputilla, and これもどうすりゃれ。 What that is? これやっぱりてたうなんとさち。うん。たうなんとてらみこばんてらのんちゅうなんとすぎやれ。わたてみこるやぶてらみこるやぶてらのんちゅうなんとすぎやれ。
Yes.
あに  これもどうすりゃれ。
Yes.
あにこれやっぱりてた 아니 롱주 미텔 롱주 롱칼 롱주를 다지 롱주 유용하대 되는다 다 롱주 유용하대 다 가리 지게에서는 집었다는 짐발을 때문에 우리 다티네 아니 어느 정도 그방 그런 가르치고 그래서는 추김성을 우리 했죠. 근데 아니 콜 상부 유야디 가르치에서는 아니 서바 공부를 때문에 우리 했죠. 다지다 서바기 제벨에 사지 제버티 스베테 우리 그냥 다 콜 상부 유야디 스베테 우리 어디 예산에 모두 그런 티처 모두 주의시는 나는 주의듯이 다들 모두 롱치들아 대연을 롱치야들아 모두 롱치시를 받아 또 모두 롱치셔야 되다 롱치야지 풀레기 온 것도 그래 또 롱주야기 주시기 때문에 대인들과 근데 디코 대인이 당나라도 제가 당하는 데니 대인들 롱주야들 롱주시 롱주야들 당나라도 대 레치사고 대 제가 당하지 수수 제가 당하는 데니 수수 대인들 롱주 중요하대 네 롱주시게 롱주 줘야 될 거라서는 저래 이제 되죠. 그것이 되게 롱주 위에야 롱주기 매뱉는 연구를 봐. 저래 이제 야를 가지다. 수술을 롱주기야 이야 온다 지야를 봐. 어디 재산이지 그 아랑주 길이 이랬었지. 어디 예산 롱주세티. 다디 그 상부에야디 서바야고 그나 그래야고 인기야. 그래서는 공부 잡으러 때에는 그 상부에야 매거든. 랑기 그 상부로 때에야 매거든. 그래서는 어디 생기 온그 컬지도 두비야가 그것도 야디 서베도 지도 처음에 봐 서베티 제비는 어디 니 그런 도시야지 어디 재산 당연도 해야지 이제
So going back to the fourth topic, the topic about elevated status or a higher realm's rebirth as being the temporary goal, temporary copper goal or something that's taught in Buddhism as a goal. Then generally it refers to rebirth as a human being or as a wealthy god. And there were three elements of that status. So the ability to experience prosperity, to have access to resources, literally objects of enjoyment, and to have the capacity to enjoy them, something that is determined by our karma and was associated with the practice of generosity. And I had the opportunity to add a point that Rinpoche mentioned yesterday that I've left out, which was that there are examples of beings that are nagas, for instance, are not human beings. They're classified as in a class as of animals, or at least sometimes powerful spirits, but anyway, they're a lower realm rebirth, and yet they're identified in some cases as being extremely prosperous. They have access to great wealth, even, it's described. So they're an example of beings who created the causes for one element of a higher realm's existence, but not the principal one. The principal one is that one has to have engaged in morality. So morality is the principal cause for achieving the form of existence. And Tibetan Lu means the body, literally, but it was referring to existence as a human being or as a worldly god. So it's not enough to practice generosity, you have to practice morality to gain that form of existence, form of rebirth, desirable rebirth. And then the third element of higher status or birth, and temporary goal of attaining higher status, is then also to have a wide circle. That word circle can have a number of meanings. So in one sense, as a Mahayanist, you need to be able to draw other people, bring people to the Dharma, and have them want to follow the Dharma, and you become the focus for bringing that about by your own traits. And so patience is an essential quality that can contribute to that. In addition to being a cause that is identified as producing physical, good physical features, attractive physical features, which also are appealing to other people. It also means that a person who has a peaceful nature is more inclined or more capable, or typically is one who other people will be more willing to associate with. And so the more people that associate with you, the larger your so-called circle. And so then that's sort of a social dimension of one's life that have that in a number of different ways have an important role to play in your own, spiritual efforts. So patience then is also included as one of the three elements of a higher status, rebirth in higher realms rebirth. So then also in relation to the first one of having prosperity, then the prosperity is, the emphasis is not so much on the fact that your karma produces prosperity. Prosperity means the objects that are enjoyed, the objects of enjoyment, the resources that may be abundant in the environment that you live, but you may not have access to them, they may not be accessible to you, you may not have the opportunity to resort to them and actually enjoy them. And it's that quality of having karmically created the condition which makes it easy for you to have access to resources and to be able to make use of them. So
that's the name. That is the mundo ripe tusia ripe te karase de jesum bitabe mundi ba
Pokyo, Shinto Pokyo.
shindu koju re nele tube ripe te le tene nele to bana shin tene nele tube ripe te le tene zo de le minu chere sanje gi nani karase de nele ripe tu chere ba nele di ribati percene ni mundo tu seberba tu mundo ti ani jesu ta be mundo teni tu is ti cerba ta tande ti chime mundo tan mundo gribe tu ta pena sudim nanda ki kansa ti cheje se ar che chima mundo junu inde 아니 수dim나 수dim이 양의 주신도 집에 간사인데 쳤으나 수dim남다기 간사디 취지사제 치마라 문도 고반 투로인데 중로인데 아니 수dim 주신도 수네 있으나 딩모도 그래 봐 다치마디 치면 문도 그렇게 두수나 아디 두sen 단데디 되게 침 문도 가르사 문도 리페 투스야 디리바디 집에 문제 튕기디 시에 문치지 랑게 땡제 되는 민우와인데 jesu bita be nungi be dile tene tuvaris di pe dile nile di kubarwa di sa zui duna milu chi pepe dile se di tuva di chesa da di jesu bita be nungi ju kubu mi duga se na
Lungi ju kubu mares re.
Tango do ju su na
So,
di chimen monto di shindu kojurba chita 타는 세지 두 치men monto 좀 나도 기레베 두라 순바라 십자그스 십자그스가 데 문에 순바나 시즌이 캐링도 아마리스 풀어 신점지 저거리 십자그스
디 십자가에서는 너가 그리고 죽고 와서요.
나도 리베 죽나 디게 아마르와 신도 거주디 제버바 치명문도 대선 단대대 다른 세계나는 문도 짬 세야지 누가 문도 짬 실레베 문도 짬 세야지 다 가르치
So, so we're talking about this topic of the higher status, right? Mumbakar. And as was presented yesterday, as it was described yesterday, it was saying this is a subject that is a form, an object of knowledge which is extremely hidden, in that we cannot verify, we cannot comprehend for ourselves all of the intricacies of how generosity, morality, and patience, in particular and in a specific way, what the exact nature of their results will be, and the general principle that those elements, those virtues will ensure the attainment of higher status is something that we need to rely upon the flawless speech of the Buddha that we determine to be flawless by those three forms of analysis, and that's how, and we infer the cause and effect relationship that brings about higher status on the basis of scriptural authority. Unlike the nature of the Four Noble Truths that we can determine on the basis of the more conventional form of inference. I can't remember the exact translation of that particular type of inference, but it means like the inference from experience. And we discussed that yesterday. That all should be something that you remember hearing about yesterday. So then the point is made that I thought I heard everybody say Kittredge's commentary, but then later it sounded like he said he gets up his commentary. At any rate, in one of the two principal biblical commentaries on the Pramanavarttika, there is a statement which says that Montot Tsam means it's a kind of primitive particle. It means just the quality of being a higher status. So I take that to mean without any specificity. So the quality of being able to achieve higher status is suggested in one of these commentaries can be established on the basis of regular form of inference, shall we say, rather than an inference based on scriptural authority. So that seems to be at odds with the whole explanation that we were talking about yesterday, that the subject matter of higher status is something that's considered to be epistemically an extremely hidden object that we cannot verify through ordinary reasoning. So then in the commentary, he says, basically that statement, right, which is found in the commentary, sort of is, it's not the word, I don't want to say problematic, but it is something that is not, maybe he doesn't explain it at length why he describes that, why he makes that statement, that sort of an unqualified form of higher status can be established on the basis of reasoning. And then Rinpoche says what that means is, for example, we could make the argument as follows. The person who is endowed with pure morality, that person in his or her future life is, we can assert, it is appropriate to assert, suggesting that it is a definite thing, that he or she will be reborn in a form of higher status, in that sense of an unqualified form of higher status, some form of higher status, and then that's the predicate of the thesis. And the reason is because that individual is someone who has cultivated in their life a pure form of morality, and so that's meant to be an actual inference, an argument, an inferential argument, which is meant to be thought of as capable of proving that the person will be born in the future in a higher realm rebirth. So that, if that's true, and it's based on what that kind of brief assertion is found in the Pramanavarttika commentary, that seems to be at odds with the general principle that the topic of the higher realm status can only be verified on the basis of scriptural authority. So Shipja Yosem is something that requires further analysis to understand exactly what that author of that commentary, how he meant that statement. Because the general principle is widely followed that we can establish that the Buddha is infallible in having taught the Four Noble Truths as a way of proving the highest good, proving the ability to achieve nirvana, and that we can verify that on the basis of reasoning. And that's the principal aim of Buddhists. That's the principal goal. That's the most important goal that the Buddha taught about. So we talk about a secondary goal or a lesser goal of higher status, and we we can reliably believe what the Buddha said about that on the basis of that other kind of inference, which relies on scriptural authority. And then the concordant example that is given is, for example, in the way that we can establish the truthfulness of the highest good. So that way of presentation is relying on scriptural authority. That argument is kind of the generally accepted point of view of what the Pramanavarttika is teaching is the latter. So then that particular passage, which suggests that you can infer future life, rebirth as being a favorable rebirth, how is that meant to be understood? Is that like that?
Madatiri dati mundu tamdiri be to sache mundu kebra jendi da to maris sijar chigina da mundu tam sezuna mundu tam mundu be to la sidujala da mundu kebra jendi mundu be to maris dati tundu ya kare mundu kebra jensina yu dinde jila yu dinde jila kansa dinde jila chudim sumbala jeni jeni pi sashi chawara ji kyaba dinde jindebe chudim pung mundu di dan minjam ji putu mari karsa mundu be putu mari.
So then Rinpoche sort of goes back and says, well, probably the way to understand these two seemingly conflicting ideas is that the statement by the commentator is saying that you can infer by reasoning, by ordinary reasoning, then in a non-specific way, that certain kinds of causal activities will ensure a higher realm rebirth. But Nuanto Tsam means only in the general sense of being a higher form of existence, but without any specificity. Kyobarchen means a higher realm birth, which has, we cannot infer, for instance, cannot infer where particularly we will be born, in exactly what family we will be reborn, and what sort of qualities of prosperity we may enjoy. That we cannot determine by reasoning, and that specificity of the higher realm rebirth, I believe, is what is extremely hidden, and so whatever we can determine about our future existence is largely dependent upon scriptural authority.
That and the book you seem to go to yesterday, 아니 거기서 투어를 내내 대화를 넘겨버디 신도 고교에 시작해. 대단자 모두 그방 bên 하던 미세대 하나 인주도 사통을 봐. 미나 통을 하도 그런 놈들을 봐. 미 그방지 놈들이 미 유대지 문주들이 다 지기 통을 봐서. 다때는데 놈들이 배도 놈 또 지금 시야티 그래서는 내숭숭래 몸바르 토아 고서 토아 내내 대화를 농주에 켜버렸디 어떻게 농의 미시도 정말이 있어서 디나 디수니 아니 내숭숭래 고서 토아 내주지 디네 별내내 대화를 농주지 해야지
So in the same commentary, 10th Dharma's commentary, it's talking about the fact that this subject is considered to be extremely hidden. So what does it mean to say it's extremely hidden? It's not extremely hidden in the sense that we can see one another directly, evident, and we are identified or recognized as being living in a rebirth which constitutes that type of higher status. So it's not an extremely hidden object in that those who are experiencing it cannot perceive it, right? We certainly can perceive that. Same is true of worldly gods. They, among the worldly gods, they can mutually see one another. So the higher status of a worldly god's rebirth is not extremely hidden in that sense, right? So, well then, how specifically do we understand the meaning that this topic is a topic that epistemically has the status of being an extremely hidden object? So the commentator says, what is extremely hidden is that we don't have the ability to perceive if we are to be reborn in such a state which is above the lower realms, so a higher status in the sense that it is, what should I say, in terms of its quality, superior to the existence of the lower realms, so higher in status in that sense. So what specifically about our environment will we be able to enjoy or find ourselves? And then in particular also in that environment, what sort of specifically what sort of enjoyments, what sort of means of subsistence and those elements that make our life more enjoyable, right? These are objects of enjoyment. We cannot determine that with any specificity. So that's the element of the nature of that as a goal, as a spiritual goal, that is beyond our ken, beyond our ability to be able to determine on the basis of reasoning. Reasoning can't tell us with any specificity what our future rebirths will be. Whatever we can determine about it with any certainty is largely based on then what we can glean from canonical statements about the nature of karma and its results.
Tati shiba temba kyumi tuchutichi. Temba kyumi tas temba tile sangye ki temba siyatu temba ti lungi temba tan love temba yinche. Sangye ki tembe tunu karishasinu tandu jibunamji junu sukibeta lundu kandu sumi bachila ta sangye ki temba sigaris. tandu jibunamji junu suteti tandu jibunamji jubje ki zura jerwa o tila junu sigi tandu jibu jubje ki zura tila tati sangye ki temba tisha guris.
So then moving to the next topic of establishing how the teaching is flawless. Then we also touched on this yesterday afternoon at the end of the day. So we started by saying what teaching here means, not any teaching, it means the Buddha's teaching, the master's with capital M, the teacher's teaching with a capital T, meaning the Buddha's teaching. So that has a kind of a definition to it, and the definition includes the persons for whom the teaching is intended. And the person for whom the individuals for whom the teaching is intended are Tanrikikibu. Tanrikikibu means those persons who are seekers of their own liberation or salvation, if you like, in a more general sense, to bring about their spiritual, attaining ultimate happiness. So Tanrikikibu, then Gyumed is, we said, was metaphorically comparable to the point of entry, or how one embarks upon one gets on a boat, for instance, how the harbor or the dock where one is able to physically climb onto the boat in order to travel somewhere. So in this case, the teaching is the point of entry in the sense of it is that subject matter which we can apply ourselves to in furtherance of that aim that we seek in life. And then it has two aspects to it. There is the scriptural form of the teaching, and then there is the I was calling it cognition. It means the sense of the internalizing the scriptural teaching in a way that you achieve the spiritual qualities that are associated with the scriptural teaching. Either one of those represent elements of the teaching, and so they are the object that represents the Buddha's teaching, either a scriptural form of teaching or a internalized cognitional form of the teaching. So that's kind of the definition of the Buddha's teaching.
다 단독이 기부세지, 다 타로되세지, 동네에 타로되세지.
What
기르시기야리.
is?
이네 아다 동네에 아발레 타로되지, 동둘라서 버투서 동네에 아발레 타로되기. 동네시야 제르바. 딜레 타로되지 단독이. 알로 야르바. 딜레 단독으로 야리. 그 강인지 제주 대리를. kunga ani shida kyagirwa chadi to sachilaya riyati nga tundu to sula yarwa ti tunge tile thandu yare chawa chimbo yina chawa tile thandu tachi tile tachi tunge rapa tile thandu ti tundu le yare tile thandu ikibu sigi megare 다 단도 이렇게 보세요. 지 레임도 풀부들에 타월 중에 그렇지. 다만 이제 dun이 풀부들에 타월 중에 다디
그래서
아데 단도 이렇게 보시게 해. 그러나 차가 dun이 중에서 했다나 차가 뒤지고 동네에서 동네에 차셔들이 딜레 탄두기로 기부지거다 탄두기 기부시 탈거되어 왔어 딜레 타러와 딜레 들어와 딜레 다 탈바시기로 와 어디서 다 탄두기 기부시야지 간데지 시그레에서는 동네에 타워를 들어 지를 시기야 와
그래서
다 동네에 라바티네 야리 투술에 타르데 바티칸에 던주다 강골로를 여러봐 어디에 탄도 이기부시야 말이에요. 다 탄도 이기부시야지. 캬바치 샤우가.
So in that definition or that description, that one element of description defining qualities of what the Buddha's teaching are is that phrase of being a person who is a seeker of liberation, Karba means liberation, generally means at least liberation of nirvana. So moksha means that's freedom, liberation. But implicit in the notion of liberation is that you want to liberate yourself from something. And so the person who is, in order to be a seeker of liberation, implies you have not yet attained that, and that there is a condition which you seek freedom from. And that freedom from, what you seek freedom from is suffering. So then the nature of suffering, the way it's to be understood as the suffering that you seek freedom from, is not suffering in an unspecified way. So all living beings, including animals, have the innate instinct to flee from overt pain. We have it ingrained in us. All beings, the avoidance of pain and the complementary impulse to find something that is alleviating that suffering. That's a basic impulse. That's not what we seek. That's not what is meant. That in that unqualified sense, in that sort of instinctive way, that's not what should be motivating us to seek liberation. Because that's typically only an impulse to seek freedom from the roughest kind of suffering, namely something that we view as painful, physically painful or mentally painful. So when we want to seek freedom from suffering, then that means specific kind of suffering. So it means the suffering that is endured by our samsaric skandhas. That implies that we have some sense of our being as being comprised of the 5 skandhas that are subject more specifically to the suffering of conditioned existence. And the suffering of conditioned existence is the most subtle kind of suffering, and the suffering that is then pervasive throughout all of samsara and covers every kind of samsaric experience there is. It is defined as suffering that is created by karma and mental afflictions, and which is ongoing in a way that over which we have no control. And an understanding of the unsatisfactoriness of samsaric existence, in that sense, that's the suffering that we want to free ourselves from. So when we say a person who's seeking liberation, it means the person who is seeking liberation from that most subtle kind of suffering. That's part of what it means to be, that's who the teaching is meant for, and we need to understand that aspect of the describing phrase.
다들 고아에 탄두셔야 돼. 고아셔야 되다. 파주주나 네 랭이 좀 인담 차세지. 다 gyumed 풍부한 고아 예수님이야. 다들 있어. 그냥 그시기 고아셔야 돼. 콜서지 고아부스 콜미 고아스 숨샤니 레자지는 자와르지. 코어부스 란지 콜서지 아니 강수부지 아니 콜서 코아지 가르쳤습니다. 그래 랭이 공기 랭이 풍부지라 아니 가르쳐 그래 동이 풍부지라 랭이 징거 시작해봐. 어떻게 코아시기 있어. 다들이 징거들이 들어보야 돼. 코아를 들으셔야 돼. 랭이 공기 만약에 동이 풍부지를 징샤해봐. 들을 들고야 돼. 되게 이상도 커니지라 아니 단도 느껴보시게 해. 제선 달라 랭이 공기 동이 풍부지 집에 풍부지를 징거들이 들도 불러들어. 네. 가사들을 단도 느껴보시. 어디서 진짜 근데 그 타브를 지내서나
그
타브.
So this phrase of being a person who is aspiring to free oneself from suffering, tanga means a seeker of liberation. Mumukshi, if you want to know Sanskrit, who wishes to free himself or herself. So we said that means to free themselves from suffering, and not just any kind of painful suffering, but the most subtle form of samsara. Another way of thinking of it is to free oneself from samsara. So then what does samsara mean? So that, in this treatise, samsara is identified with the 5 impure skandhas themselves. That the contaminated skandhas are samsara, because they are what samsara means, a kind of a wandering or a repetitive action, and so it is the 5 skandhas themselves which have, as one of their the impure skandhas, have a quality. Cha means a quality of the 5 skandhas, which is that they are subject to repetitive rebirth. Samjaro means to be joined to a future life. So as long as we're still subject to the mental afflictions, then each life that we experience, when it comes to an end, we will be forced to take birth again. We have no control over that. And that quality that's part of our being is really the essence of what samsara means. Samsara doesn't typically mean a location. It's not referring to a place, so to speak. Another word that is meant to convey the essential quality of samsara is that it is the state of bondage. So bondage is contrasted with liberation. Samsara is a state of bondage, and where does that bondage come from? It comes from the fact that we are uncontrollably shackled or bound by our own karma and mental afflictions. We are unable to free ourselves from that condition, and that's the real essence of samsara, according to some. So according to some, it is the five skandhas themselves. There are various different descriptions of exactly what samsara means. One is that it's the five skandhas. One is that it's an element of the five skandhas, that element of having to be reborn. Then there are other views which say that that samsara refers to an agent or a subject, a person who is undergoing samsara, and then there is a locus where samsara takes place, and then there is the essence of samsara itself, which is being continually having to be reborn and experience those kinds of samsaric rebirths.
다티네 다티 당주기 기부 중우스 다티 템버기 샤브 산지기 템베 체 샤브르가 다티네 다 산지기 템버들 룽기 템버다 도베 템바 니체 룽기 템버데 산지기 숭데다 디 산지기 숭기 아니 공대 디 공부때 된줄 알아봐.
공부때
산지 순체 산지 순 이 공부치 지다와 신도 되니기 된줄 알아봐. 어떻게 룽기 템바지.
So when we say the scriptural form of the teaching, then there's a word for scriptural. That there's this particular term, lum. It has something to do with spiritual literature in a general sense. In this case, the scriptural refers to the Buddha's speech. So you say Sanghiki Sum. Sum is then Vajana, Buddha's actual discourses, what he taught verbally. So that's the principal form of the scriptural teaching. But in connection with that, it's also understood to mean that certain then, what shall I say, qualified then masters, not Buddhas, but followers, who have the ability to explicate, clarify the meaning of the Buddha's word. So sometimes the Buddha's word is, we as ordinary beings are not able to comprehend precisely what the intent of the Buddha's actual speech, how it's to be understood. And so those commentaries, which some great masters write, with the aim of explicating the meaning of the word of the Buddhas, or the true intent, how it's meant to be understood, are also included within, I guess in a secondary way, as part of the scriptural teaching.
That's Sanjay. Lungi temba dinsiati, lungi temba dinsiati, tanaju Sanjay sungtela, Mosabachia, Sambachia, Sambachia. Tatianku Sanjay sunga Chobachi to Zamba, the Kunu Shendachi to Jarach, Kunu to Jajani Chobachi Guerra, Chigi, Mani, teacher, Sambata Numuja Maimba Chigi. 아니 처바체스나 처바체 삼바체 상계기 순지기 된다 지가 도야지 처바체 취미 어다디 수신도 녀야 수신도 녀네 수신도 샹레시아 딘지 제바 마제바세 아 롱기 템바 디야디 디 최선 군수 수신도 제바 디 제네 니 디신 야 샹레야 파트 제바디 아니 산지 롱기 템바 디바세티 아 딘지 제바 마제바
마치오스는 마와.
두가 제바 하나이 스마와세티 딘진바다 딘지 제바 마제바 두가 제바 다디 딘지 세티 지치네 지전에 산지기 템바 진베 체티 롱기 템바 진바티 파마 샹마 마와체티 로베 템바티 란지 치시 두베티 야트리 세치 딘지 제바 딘진바 제바스 마치바 두가 제바 하나이 스나 나지 네 마치제 룽기 때문에 프랑스야티 최선랑 최선 무슨 수신 진 제바이나 룽기 때문에 집아체 다 최선 그 수신 제바 관에 샹라야 삼바 우는 남바다가 보내 샹나 마와체나 네 산지 룽기 때문에 집아스 제티 디카레스니 취지 집아스야티 디리 취징 임무제 민배 도서연다 지시된세 제르바 삼바 임무제 마이베 보네 네 제르나 소바주스 다티리 다 룽기 템바스야티 산지 디샤 디진데 체데 랑기 군은 상부권이 처바지야 삼바지야 처바지야티 지바르치야 나서인티 디네 처바지야네 랑기 데토바티 샤나 마와체바티 디에 진바지야 룽기 템바 진바지야 다티 데니 취 진바이리.
So there's a related term, a term that's related, another term that's related to the teaching, right, as a noun, right? And there is Demba Zimba, which is a word which means literally to hold, to keep hold of, but it should be understood as to uphold, or even more loosely, to preserve. So the preservation of the teaching, Demba Zimba, is carried out in a number of ways. So obviously that's a significant idea and something that is something to bear in mind about kind of our responsibility in relation to the teaching, which is to say we don't want the teaching to disappear and the teachings maintained or preserved by the actions of others. In particular, then listening, so key elements of the activity to preserve the teaching involve then specifically a pure motivation. So the motivation or the act is the act of learning and understanding and gaining an awareness of the meaning of the Buddhist scriptural teaching, but we can do it for the wrong reason. We can have an impure motivation, so that does not constitute upholding the teaching. So if we have a pure motivation, proper motivation, and then the activity of listening to the Dharma and reflecting on the Dharma, the scriptural Dharma, then that constitutes an element of preserving the Dharma. Then that's an important activity. Beyond that, then the person who not only studies and learns the Dharma, but then with that knowledge, then teaches it to others, right? Explains it to others, verbally transmits it to others, then that's the essence of preserving the scriptural Dharma, by teaching to others the meaning of the scriptural Dharma that you yourself have determined the meaning of. And that also is understood to be a form of generosity, the generosity of bestowing or giving the gift of the Dharma to others. And so that act also should not be thought of as being done in an improper way or an arbitrary way. It's that teaching the Dharma is meant to be done as an act that accomplishes the droidan. Droidan means the needs, the spiritual needs or aims of others. So then preaching or explaining the Dharma to others, in that sense, is upholding the scriptural Dharma, the essence of the most important element of upholding the scriptural Dharma. So then there's a corresponding act of upholding the cognitional Dharma. Upholding the cognitional Dharma is accomplished by engaging in spiritual practice yourself and attaining, you're internalizing the meaning of the Dharma by meditating on it and reflecting on it and generating those spiritual qualities that are related to the Dharma, the scriptural Dharma. And that activity is upholding the cognitional form of the teaching.
Jampa kumya, di jeneta sanjegi tembe chuga chiba kuna yis. Lungi tobe tembe seyati, ziyati chuga chiyatiri. Chuga chiyasiyati kumyatiri. Tipe rangha koba di, hani chua la tengi. Dine chuishin tuya. So
this important term of upholding the Dharma, then the essence of upholding the scriptural Dharma is a verbal act. The speech in which you impart and share the Dharma with others. The essence of the act of upholding the scriptural Dharma is engaging in practice. Dhruva means practice. In particular, I've given an example. When you carry out you cultivate the instruction for developing bodhicitta and you engage in that form of practice, or whether you engage in the instruction for how to cultivate and develop loving kindness, you are engaging that form of practice. Constitute Tibetan word for it is nyamlen, right? So nyamlen and dhruva are similar. Dhruva is a more technical term, or more nyamlen is a more general term for adopting or cultivating or putting into effect the instruction. So that activity constitutes the essence of preserving or upholding the cognitional form of the teaching. It's keeping it alive by having individuals who possess knowledge of the Dharma.
Sanjigi lungi temba zimba lungi tobe temba zimba la kare sanjigi temba la jumpa te ta jamdu te sanjigi tembe jubu yinche tembe jubu nangu shoge teacher karichene jamdu singi chigituga jamdu te nambe temba la jubu koti singi te ni nambe temba la ta Mambiyari Dinani Tiba Chimbu Juba Kotirava. Oti Yesan Tinita, Sanjay Temple Juba Koti, Kambu Yesan, Kambu Siba Kone, and Sanjay Lunga Temple, Tosunchia, Chabachia, Tobe Tibati, Nichi, Sambachia, Ombachia, Oti Chavin, and Sambata Kumbati, Sambata Kumbachi, Tobe Temple Zimiari. What is that young Jambukutuga?
So then another part of the definition was saying that the teaching is that that entity which constitutes the point of application, right? Gyumed, that entry point, not necessarily entry point, but that thing that one engages, either through its scriptural form or through its cognitional form. So the act of engaging the Dharma has to have a starting point, and that is called Gyumed, the door by which one applies oneself, or if it's the door by which one enters. So the door by which one enters the teaching is identified with the act of taking refuge. So the act of taking refuge is also a form of practicing the Dharma. And engaging in that practice is the form of practice by which one embarks upon the path. In general, in the case of the Mahayana, the entry point for the Mahayana is the development of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the entry point, Gyumed, or the door by which one enters or engages into the Mahayana teaching, the Mahayana form of the teaching. So that word of engaging, or that object of engagement that relates to the teaching, then we can talk about what's the starting point for it. So obviously taking refuge is key to engaging the teaching. It says Dembala Gyumed. It says the door by which one enters the teaching. Again, the same subject the main subject we're talking about. And so then, just again to reiterate, among the three types of activities, listening, contemplation, and meditation, listening, the act of listening to the Dharma, is generally associated with the scriptural Dharma. You're listening to verbal explanations about the Dharma, or the teaching in terms of the language that's used to express the teaching's meaning. Once you engage in that, then the second and third principal types of spiritual activity, of reflection and meditation, then you're shifting from the scriptural aspect of it to the meaning that it encompasses, or the meaning that it conveys, and then you're focusing on that and trying to develop that internally by your own understanding, so that activity constitutes the practice of the conditional form of the teaching.
Sanjay Temba Santi Marandu Kiri, Tibetia Mijashi, Gawa Pusum Soba Jazz, Rangi Semni Unsutus, Tini Sanjay Temba is. Thus, Sanjay Temba Santi, Tiba Ponya, Ani Gawa Tulia, Tibetia Michi, Gawa Pusum Soba Jazz, Rangi Semni Unsutus, Tini Rangi Semdi. Tibun Kitu Dr. Rangi Sem, she do her choosing that she was you go at Tiba Consuna, Tiba Bambe Chani, and soldier of Japan, and soldier Japan, some shiwarati thing better. To Kanjet that is Sanjay Tem Tobetem, but the Pambe Chata. Ani Ramkichani Yarva, Tibat Chia Mijashi is the Pambe Char, the Panga to the Tarama Bimburba, what the Pambe Charji, Nuzua, Tiba Soju, Dubi, Soju Dubi, Sembati Tatirba, Soju, Nitibarba. The Pansuna, the Jigi, Pambo, the Chachiarva, but did Sandy the way. Nini Joel Jubati, Sojupan is Karasuri. Joel and Joel Karachesuni. That Joel Mambia, Mani Doya, Joel Chiarva. Kanjeta Sangi Lapjati Sususam the Suni, any chief, Mani de Kawayari, neat lapche tilete ni soju kombe pansuna ni sanje tembachi legiare sanje tembachi ram legiare odi chesa tibachi amecha shika pusun chubaje rangi semni musu tu dine sanje tembachi stati rangi semna pujor tesuna
Karatesa?
sem dus
What it?
sem tetsi shishi duara chichmusuna dine ta sanje tembachi yesi ta dine sanje tembachi ati je lung temba to tobe temba ni choimba ta ti tobe temba ti ba ti bachi ami chashi ke wa so chura jese.
So there is a very famous verse. It's contained in the Udana Varga, and a collection of verses which the Buddha uttered, and it has 4 lines. First line says means not engaging in any non-virtuous or misconduct or like the word evil or bad deed of any kind. Avoiding any kind of bad deed. Second line is then trying to perfect or cultivate as well as you can virtuous acts. Gao means virtuous acts. Means in a very well developed way. Rangi sem means third line. Rangi sem means your own mind. Yonsu dul means then to gain overall or complete control, to subdue, to tame your mind. Then these 3 activities represent Sangye Demba Shavartasa, Yumbartasa. Sangye Demba Shavartasa.
Sangye temba sigiri yesu.
Sangye Demba last time. Dini Sangye Demba Yin. Dini Sangye Demba Yin. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. This is the Buddha's teaching. So the verse itself is a form of scriptural teaching, right? It's the word of the Buddha. Then that particular verse is advice, right? Lapja, it is instruction. Do this. Do the act of avoiding any kind of misdeed or abandoning whatever misdeed you may have the impulse to engage in. Also cultivate virtue. And as much as possible, if you engage in those 2 activities of avoiding non-virtue and cultivating virtue, they will have a positive effect on your mind. They will make your mind more peaceful. So the dulwa means to be brought under control. Often in connection with that, we say with 2 words, shishing dulwa. Shishing dulwa means that if the mind is actually brought under control, then that will provide you, endow you with a certain kind of peacefulness of mind. The mind will be more settled and therefore calm. So achieving that ability through that particular action, that represents the Buddha's teaching. So those 3 activities that are mentioned in the first 3 lines of that verse are directing us to engage in the activities that constitute the essence of the cognitional form of the Buddha's teaching. And so then the practice of practicing the morality of abandoning non-virtuous deeds, that is a form of abandonment. So Dharma Ratna is the truth of cessation and truth of the path. So this is a form of abandonment, but not the abandonment of the truth of cessation. Nevertheless, it has a significance of being something that is in a way related to attaining that ultimate abandonment by abandoning non-virtuous deeds. So we can understand those activities, those practices, as being a form of the cognitional teaching, engaging in the activity that serves to uphold the cognition teaching as well.
That's Sanjay Togetimba Seti Jachingore, Jampa, Ninji, Janju, Center, Tuni to be Shira, Junta, Nejanduta, Roda Sukangalo, Sanjay Temba, Sanjay Temba Seti, Togetimba Seti.
So Buddha's teaching is vast in its what it encompasses, both scripturally and in terms of the particular kinds of practice that we can undertake. So,
the Janata, and Sanjay Temple Chava Chesati, Sanjay Temple Chamber, Yamnature, Niji Yamnature, Sanjay Temple Chava Chesi. Lungi Temple Chava Chesi, Lungi Temple Chava Chesi, Chavaya Chesi, Sanjay Lungi Temple Chava Chesi, that's Sanjay Temple Chava Chesi, Lungi Temple, Tobe Temple, Tuition to be at the Yamnature, that's Sanjay Tobe Temple, Mapia. Ninjura Yamnature and Sanjay Temple in Natures. And then Jampa the Ninja of Chikune, Sanjay Temple Yamnatures. It's just that
so in relation, so the main subject here is the teaching, the teaching, what that is. And then another formulation would be, what are the acts, what activities should be carried out in relation to teaching? As a follower, what activities should we engage in? So the activities that should be carried out are, then the activity in relation to the scriptural teaching is essentially to learn it, to listen to it, so that we can learn it through its verbal aspect. Then all the efforts that we engage in to accomplish that represents the activity that we should do in relation to the scriptural aspect of the teaching. And then, of course, it's meant to be done properly. Tsulushibu means that we do that with proper motivation and in an appropriate manner. And then the second one is that once we have gained knowledge, scriptural knowledge, we've gained some understanding of the words of the Buddha and general idea of the meaning, then we have to engage in the activities of reflection and meditation on various subjects. And then that represents the activity that we carry out in relation to the cognitional form of the teaching. And so when we are cultivating renunciation, that activity, that form of practice is an activity that needs to be carried out in relation to the teaching. Same thing for loving kindness, meditating on loving kindness, instruction on loving kindness, and compassion, bodhicitta, and so on. And those kinds of activities are the activities that are meant to be carried out in relation to the cognitional form of the teaching.
That Gyumed to the that Gyumed to the Look at them by Gyumed to the noon delay. Sanjay loon data delay. She does soon, but she will never reach. And those in that loon, they sit in the loon TV. Any loon to Gyumed to do into the she, the never die near the city. The she will understand, but then but the never reach.
Yes.
Those, that lungi tempati Gyumed. Frank Sumbati, any Sumbatar Dona never a child was lungi Gyumed Shasila. That Dinala soon Sanjay the sheets. Did Yata the city be better to Yala Sanjay lungi tembati karasa tenshi tembe lungi ke meba tobala tenshi sumbatar tyan negu tu sambre jeni niti sumti chamare shas karasa kunan sumti jejati tembatar tyan negu tu shebuba shebu tishe sumita ke meba to Tinyala ti shiti de betu kutuba. Ti shiri betu siti tat goten da landera ti ripetu kutuba. Tat goten ti ripetu yudu goten ti kyo me to sibu yubari. Tat goten kyo me to ju. Tobe temba ti kyo me to ju ti lungi temba ti ta lungi ti chitar temba tar tona nebra chi to suna lungi temba ti kyo me to che. Ta ti lungi le ani ninji temba tar ninji minam temba tar tona nebra chi to suna mipata namba chelero cherva ninji mipati ndechiri namba tindechiri chele tindechiri shabina ti tona nebra tar temba tar ti tuna tai ninji tembe ti kyome pare tosuna tati ninji ti kyome to ti karesana ane mipa namba chele ni ninji mipate sunje tamje miparwa tuni jinji sunje miparwa namba ti tuni ge chandi namba cherwa chele ti ninji jele teni ta sunje tuni le chawa chele ti ninji jele teni sunje tuni le chawa chebar chirwa ta chele ti tige ti chansu ta ti ninji ti krime bares ti ninji te do tobe te ba gyumed to ju ti tinde te ji sena ni ya kubi pa de namba chele ta gyumed bares to sena chele ki chani gyumed mipa tati san tobe temba di ninji tabu chigi tendu tobe temba gyumed tona ti toju karare tungi tobe shirab ki tendu ane tobe temba di gyumed toju ti kandere sina anti sheru pata gyumed toju ti lungi temba gyumed toju ti lungi ti chitar temba tar tona nevara chi toju ti
Tobe temba?
Ta tobe temba ti tirvata gyumed toju ta ninji tabi tendu tobe temba gyumed toju ti kande yin sina mipa ta namba ta chele la suba ta gyu ta mipa ta chele la suba ya lung le suba na shi ne to ma to ta ba chen lung le suba na shi ne to ma to ta ki na ta ti ki le yin Rodati, sati, tanda dina le tiye, tanda naram le dina la, tamba kyome to tuche bata, tamba thandu bujumu sutuba mendatis, tamba kyome chebe chik ngachitang, kongo, gawa meba, situ tang lungi tamba sanyi sutuba, chik mechi gawa meba. Ani, ta ching na chi tang ching na ta chi go ma se na ching na chi 당 대응 공모 가면 대응 친내지 가면 대응 거 전다지 공모도 공도 시야를 전다도 로드 시야를 전다니 그 가면 신도가 디리스 소나타데 롱데 템베 게임 또 수르치게 도가 또 도블 템베 게임 또 주디가 이리스
So then having understood what the meaning of the teaching is in those two aspects, and that defining defining phrase, a phrase that incorporates all the elements that relate to the teaching and its purpose and aspects, then the one activity that is being addressed as something that we ought to achieve is an understanding that the teaching is flawless. So to realize the unflawed nature of the teaching. So if the teaching has those two aspects of the scriptural teaching and the cognitional teaching, so then there must be an unflawed, a way of determining how the scriptural teaching is unflawed, and a way of determining how the cognitional teaching is unflawed. So then, in a general way, we can think of the cognitional teaching as being unflawed in the sense using the distinctions of the verb to express. So there's the future participle of express, which means that which is to be expressed. What is to be expressed is subject matter or meaning. And then the expressing agent is the words. So the words, or the verbal form of teaching, that's the scriptural teaching. So if the words of the scriptural teaching, if we investigate what the meaning that is expressed by the words of the scriptural teaching, and we determine that what the scriptural teaching says verbally correctly describes the nature of certain meanings, and we verify those meanings to be true in the way that the scripture describes them, then that's one way to think of recognizing the scriptural teaching as being unflawed, being correct, being valid. So then in Pendar Laramba's text, he says something a little bit different in that he says the unflawed nature of the scriptural teaching involves investigating the scriptural teaching, what the words of the overall teaching incorporate, and examining whether something said at one time is how it compares to something said at a different time, and are those compatible, that they are not inconsistent in any way, that they're not contradictory in any way. So determining a certain overall consistency of the Buddha's teaching is how we verify the flawlessness of the scriptural teaching.
민지티가 차배원도 수는 민지티 해봐. 그냥 랑이에를 전주 민지게 달러지 따질 때는 있는 랑이 민지티 야부레도 하면서 따니 니에를 지다 동해쟁이 선제다 장이 밤마순이 알바 동해쟁이 니에를 니뒤던가 전주 민지게 밤마라고 지려야 채스는 밤마티고 라는 저와단 맹이 팬도 맹이는 마킹이 들어가 될 동해기 전주 그 저와지 기부도에서는 게 가부 지리는 딱 그렇게 지야가 이만세 딱 달라티네 다들에 딱 저와지 기야 랑 저와지는 유지 저와지 요새야 지야가 다지지도 투인도 간데 지금도 딱이나 다지도 투인도 니지 기금 미도는 거기다 니지디 견제를 지르바 초리를 지르 손들바 재산 닝지디 당인 양내 지역 닝지를 뒤는 닝지디 근데도 닝지 생일디 흉내 시합은 신기 아니 인데도 이랬다면 다제 지구가 다제 지지도 되는 그스전이 다제전이 흉내 시합을 시도 난심이 두스는 흉내 시합을 제스는 인지세야지 동해진지 선제 강남이 장 전주도 나가 진지스 그게 동해진지 선제 강남이 장 다제 투네 발마치 투네 니엔지 투네 아니 전주로 남기게 주비야라 안티 티 요새는 다 인지티 교육에는 약간 지르기야라 이 마체비체 다른 미디 미지티 마이키 니엔의 미디 좀 기야라 지제베 있는 미지티 단데 약간 중요한 거봐 다 뒤에 소리잖아 인지대도 Jampa Gyumed to Jusia, the Niji for a Gyumed to Tosuna, Langakunya, Niji. Anything is that Niji, Niji did Dobet and the Gyumed to Tosia, Jelina.
So, then there's also a similar activity of examining the teaching in relation to its cognitional form in order to determine whether it is flawed or not. That's something different. It's not about the Buddha's teaching. It's about our own practice and whether we're practicing it correctly or not. So then, before we talk about that more specifically, there's a more general idea about the need to examine the Dharma, the teaching, before one applies oneself to it. So, for example, typically when we feel we have something that we want to obtain, an ordinary object, we want to buy something. So we need a teacup, a particular teacup. We're short on teacups. So we go to a store and then we pick up a teacup and we look at it and then we examine it and we determine whether it suits us, whether we like it, whether it's chipped or not, and whether we like its shape and so on. And so we often are rather discriminating in how we do that. Some shoppers are very discriminating shoppers. And so similar to that, we also ought to be just as discriminating in the way that we approach the Dharma that we undertake to practice, and then once we do practice it also, as we are engaged in practice, we constantly need to sort of evaluate our own practice to see how our efforts measure up. So, for instance, if we take as a form of practice, particularly compassion. So we need to understand the meaning of compassion. The meaning of compassion has several components to it. Compassion is a mental quality that has a particular object that it is generated towards, and that is understood to be then suffering beings, a suffering being in some form, or all suffering beings, or specific suffering beings. Doenjing, dissenting, right? So that's its object. That's the mental object of compassion. Then, as a subjective mental state, it has a certain form to it, a certain aspect to it. Its namba is that it has the kind of the emotional component of being desirous to alleviate or eliminate that suffering that is being perceived in some sentient being or in a group of sentient beings. And then we can also think of what is the function of compassion. How does compassion affect us? So that compassion, if it's strong enough, then it will kind of compel us. It will urge us to do what is necessary to bring about that emotional component. So what has to be done if we want, in fact, to alleviate the person's suffering? So all of those are then the kind of the essential elements surrounding the quality of spiritual quality of compassion generally. So that's a kind of investigation to understand what compassion is in its totality, and then when we are trying to practice it, so then we need to we need to kind of at certain points, in order to practice true compassion as it is meant to be practiced, is that it should be impartial. It should be unbiased. It should be something that we are able to cultivate, or we're able to develop towards everyone. And among those, then we have those three categories of friend, stranger, or neutral person, and enemy. And so the friend is the easiest person, the easiest category of being in which to develop compassion. So then the first kind of test is to see whether, in fact, we are able to develop the same intensity or the same sincerity of compassion that we have towards our friends, towards those people that we feel no particular connection with, that they're not a friend, they're not someone who's ever done anything beneficial to us. At the same time, they haven't done anything harmful to us. So what reason do we have to feel compassionate toward them, even though they're experiencing the same compassion that we naturally feel empathy for in our friends? So if we don't have the same degree of concern and love for those people who we don't have any connection with, then that tells us that our compassion, our cognitional form of compassion, is flawed. So we need to refine it in such a way that the same degree of compassion can be generated towards those people who, in an objective way, we have no special connection with in terms of our history with that person. And then beyond that, obviously the enemy is the person that's the most difficult kind of object to develop compassion towards. And so we need to also cultivate the same quality towards them. And as long as we are not able to have this compassion, the true compassion as it was defined was, no matter what sentient being you direct your attention toward, recognizing that all sentient beings are subject to the same samsaric suffering, then one should make an unqualified determination to want to alleviate their suffering, regardless of your relationship with him or her. So being critical about our own way of actually being able to develop that represents examining whether our cognitional form of compassion is flawed or unflawed.
だってね、だってジョアチタンに 아니 렌티 슈리 저도 생활이 샤투.
So there's a little bit of time remaining, but Rinpoche thinks that he would like to hear the question, and then he'll give an answer in the afternoon. So
I have a quick question that might require a longer answer.
Okay.
But Rinpoche said this morning that he believes that we can establish through normal inference or reasoning that by engaging in virtuous activities, we can, at least in general, create the conditions for a higher reward. So my question is, how is this something, what are the arguments, what is that reasoning that we can use for understanding that to be true?
Dagindi ane karsa jidang ngonto karsa ngonto ki da karsa da jukja di shindu kokyo imbares chiksungare di jebosongi takwa de rumato nge tugyo nare yene da karsa jewana ngonto tsam chik ngonto ki juk tugres na rusiki chik karsa Rinpoche Gweba, that the Rinpoche, the Gweba, the Samuchi Shabda, that the Kasa, that Suzum can Drupsu can the Gadas to Gears, that the Tati and Kasa Koran, Children Yanda, Yaning, the Kasa Imbe Church Sarada, the Jason Koran, Mahomba, Montozamchi, that the Kasa. Rooms that the rooms and the taki kadas and the chava kadas.
That's the chava thing.
Moto ki ripalaten.
Really, should do shit so that I see the any you be given me
Correct?
should do shit so that I 记住行底下行个，
去等绿灯这儿，
是记录这些做不成的记住行个钱吧，这确实是呢，아니 ran데 누구 기능인데 누구 기능이 있어. 실제 저 초바 참에 신이 있어요. 디페레. 일단 집안에
신선한 데 꼭해서 디스고.
신가.
답사디.
답사디나는 그디 쇼야를 줘야리 아니 야리 내디야와. 아니 딱그 아니 그 견질을 때니 아니 누구 기름 레이스 누구 기름 레이스
룸들 누구지 여러분 다들 never master your room 레이스
이 기름이 인데스 아니 가르사 출력도시 저거창 게임 신이 왜 제세가 같은 지대 수준난 걸 따고 수면에서니 기분 취해지스
그래 기름인데
아니 수준 응원도 두루인데 아니 수준난 걸 따고 수면 가사이 매체스 어디서 따단지 따뜻이 집에서나
다 룸 세인디 마오마디 메와르지 기그레스 메바스게 룸 센서 Okay, so maybe I left out one element of that argument, which is critical, and which is to say that the thesis is that the person who possesses pure morality is capable. So the word capable is I think the idea that you cannot infer the result from the cause. The cause is the person that possesses morality. Right? So, but that morality is a necessary condition, right? And therefore, because of that, you can say that person has a potential. Rung in Tibetan means capable, or even possible or able to be reborn in a higher realm rebirth. The argument has that force to it. And so, kind of in response to your question in particular, Rinpoche used the instance of a field, farmer's field. A farmer's field that is properly irrigated or has water, is watered or receives rain or whatever moisture, and has enough warmth, and then is fertile. That if such a field exists, right, and then you plant a seed, a what do you call it, a seed which is not rotten, right, in that field, then that field or that seed has the capacity. Remember, the ruminants has the capacity to grow, to germinate and produce its result. So that is the kind of the force of the argument is that a person who possesses morality therefore possesses the capacity that will bring a higher realm rebirth. The argument perhaps has that force to it.
다들이 나도 신경도 차려. 시켰다 저 바보 쇼야. 파파. 바보 쇼야. 바보 쇼스다. 다들 게 말아. 다들 이게 맞는 거예요. 이유야.
So part of that argument, another sort of what I would say, corollary of that argument is that if you plant such a seed in such a field, the seed has the capacity to produce its crop. However, as long as some untoward concentration, let's use the example of no pigs come along and root up the field, right? That doesn't happen. It has a capacity to ripen. That's not a certainty. It's not a foregone conclusion. So the same way, a person who practices morality, if there's no factor that mitigates against it, then that person has the capacity to be reborn as a higher realm rebirth. It should be understood in that sense.
디나시 다그 수림디 논도 그야기 수림지 숭샤리 숭 디야르바 아니 칠시 그 정도로 달아 디레지 계선 그좀 그러봐 그 사이드 레디 수림디 숭디 상가데 진에 야 논도 루롱아지 니 계신다 마테나 루롱아지 사샤
So, for example, the notion of karma, right? Karma as a cause, and the samsaric rebirth as a result, that is incorporated within the Four Noble Truths, right? That's an element of the Four Noble Truths. That's something that we can examine with reason. That's something that we can determine rationally as being reasonable. Right? So the nature of a cause, right? The karmic cause of pure morality, having engaged in that, creates the karmic causes, right? Which have the capacity as being virtuous karmic causes to produce a rebirth, a future rebirth that is in a higher state. So what that's saying is, in a general way, we have the ability to infer that through the more basic form of inferential reasoning, and that does not require relying on the Buddha's instruction about karma. That's kind of the key part of it. So that part of it we can infer.
Yeah, that is it.
Sashi, Begin Joji Matoka, Abhinavi, Sanje Shindu, Thank you.
Yeah, chew.
Not take